Alrighty. Gino's had about 3 rides out in the paddock now to just, do some trail riding, look at some hills, look at some gullies, look at some creek crossings, be a bit of a horse. We've done some little bit of work shaping him up as we went, the same as we were kind of doing in the arena. But basically just leisure miles, I suppose. And he's also had quite a few days off just due to weather and circumstance. We haven't been able to get to him every day, so he's not quite sure how many days he had off, but quite a few. So we haven't lunged him today. So again, a little bit of a educated gamble. But if I hopped on again, like I said before, if I hopped on and felt he was very exuberant, had lots of energy, I'd go lunge him a little bit. But today's work's going to be reasonably slow. Although it will depend a little bit on how he goes. If he goes really great, well, we might end up doing a little bit more with him. But today we're going to start him on side passing and coming off my leg and trying to teach him to steer with my feet a bit more. So as you know, we've already done a bunch of move your hip over and then lead your front end out. Just one rein stop. Don't play with my foot. Move your hip. Lead your front end out. So there are his natural responses to that bend, that leg, the place he's most liable to step. Now we're going to try and use that to start him on the next phase. So we'll move his hip to the right, but then we'll lead his front end to the right. So these are movements he's done before, but slightly different order. So we'll move his hip to the right, good job. And then we'll lead his front end to the right. Move his hip to the right, good. And lead his front end to the right. And give him a little break. So we're working on side passing, but we're not, doesn't matter so much where he ends up facing at the moment. I'm just moving his back end. And this is a movement he already knows. Yeah. And then moving his front end. And then I'll move his back. And of course he's, swatting at flies and being a bit goofy because he's a child. And we'll move his front. Back end again. Yeah. And front end again. Go for his back. So what we're aiming here, of course, got left leg on, pushing his rump to the right, left leg on, trying to lead his front end to the right. And then we're going to start putting our leg in the middle and just seeing what he offers and see if both ends will reach across at once. Is the ultimate aim. But early on, he knows these two movements because he's done these a lot. You've seen me do them a lot on him, just when he's going fast, just when we're reinforcing steering. So he knows the two movements. We're just doing them at a slightly different way, different pace. And just a little lock up there, he got a little confused and like, So he's got to start to think about, you know, where the pressure's coming from, where my hand is, the angle of the rein. He's got to sort all of that. And of course he found his way out and he moved his hip over, so I'm not going to do too much more. I'm going to give him a little mental break again. And we'll go again. Like we've said before, it's another kind of spot that we could have, you know, a few little discussions about things. So I'd still rather be pulling on his nose while we get all these messages sorted. Which is again why we're still in the Bosal for this part of it. I was going to move him up to a hackamore today, which is just a slightly thicker version of that. Thicker but softer, as in softer touch. But unfortunately it didn't fit him so good. So need to bring another one next time. That was a pretty nice step. So his hip moves over there. Lead his front. Good. Might set him up this time to see if we get both at the same time. So no. Got his hip, got his front. Go for his hip again. Go for his front again. The other part about I like doing it this way is years ago when I was a kid, you know, got on the ground, used your thumb and taught your horse to move over and, you know, go and stood him up against a fence and, you know, you keep aiming them at a fence and keep annoying them on this side until they step across. And some horses that was all good. Others kind of got upset and, you know, jumped and kicked and had issues. So what I love about doing it this way is, you know, that movement leads to this movement, leads to the next movement. And if they get confused, I can always go back to something that they know a little better. Now I've jumped on older horses who've never side passed before and spent a few minutes teaching them, you know, the first bit and then a few minutes teaching them the second bit, and they get side passing within one session. So you can do it in a different time frame with different horses. He's obviously green, so we're trying to spell it out for him as best we can. But again, like most of what he's got to endure, there's sort of horses doing things all around the place again, so he'd rather be going and talking to them and seeing what's happening. One of the only things that's kind of bothering, or one of the things that's a little issue with this horse, but he's certainly not the first horse I've had, there's lots and lots. He's really focusing on what's happening to his nose, and he's not thinking so much about what's happening with my leg. But that's okay. I'm not too worried about that. He'll get it sorted. There we go. We got a bit of everything got sideways then. And then we got another nose issue. And then sideways. His weight kind of went the right way, but his feet didn't follow through. So we'll let him quit on that. Because we can't keep at him for too long. You know, that's obviously as much as he could deal with at that particular time. He needs another little walk. But like I said, I'm putting my left leg on, asking him to go to the right. Now, if he gets confused, I can always go back to like piecework. Do your back bit or do your front bit, but just as long as something goes to the right, I can release my legs. So legs on, off. Legs on, squeezing, bumping, yep. Front end went across, legs off because his hip went across. So my leg's on and off the whole time with how he responds. So I put my leg on and he steps, my leg comes off. Put my leg on, he steps, my leg comes off. And at this point, of course, he's going to be all over the place. Oh, we'll take that. So right at the end, we just had a little drift of both ends. And that's all we're looking for is, you know, as a try, and I can take that pressure away, because like everything we do, go where the pressure isn't is a big deal to the horse. So as soon as I can let him know that he got it right, the better. So legs on, off, on, a little stuck with his nose again. Move your hip, move your front. Move both, good boy. There we go. So we had 1 or 2 steps there that kind of went sideways. And all of this is like my ultimate goal isn't just to develop a side pass. It's basically making sure that I'm moving my horse off my leg. So when I start to use my leg aids later on, oh, there's a big step. Good boy. There we go. Let's quit on that. That was good. So when I use my leg aids later on, he's going to move his body away from it. Now, I got to teach him what leg means. And at the moment, I just left leg, something's got to go right. Back end, front end, both ends. You know, it doesn't have to be super specific at the moment. It will be later, obviously, for sure. But at this point, we just want him to step across. Like I said, he gets a little bit obsessed with what's happening to his nose at times. Nice, there we go. He broke into a jog, but you know, like I said before, he's a little lazy, so occasionally if he offers me a little effort, I'm not going to shut him down straight away. I'm going to pull his nose around there because he's getting a little bit rude about, you know, bending and giving to that pressure. Always something to look at, isn't there, mate? So just people over there moving some poles and shoving them outside the arena, and it just takes his attention a second. G'day, thank you so much for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, turn on the notifications bell, that would be awesome. Thank you. Cheers. Yep. Both hands. Come on. And I'm very big at this point, like he doesn't know what leg means. I'm not going to put a spur on to reinforce it. Because then I feel like I'm reinforcing something he doesn't know. When he knows about it and he chooses not to try, then I would put a spur on. You stepped across, and even though it was a bit of a stumble, it's still kind of heading the right way. He probably needs a little break. And just like a lot of other things, I'm just doing one side and then the other. You know, left leg, go right. And then in a little while, it's going to be all about the other leg. Oh, there we go. Hip. Hip's got to come too. There we go. Good boy. So most horses, you think about it, they're good at crossing their front. If something spooks at them here, they turn and run so their front crosses and their hind end pivots. But their hind end doesn't go sideways so much. Now, a horse will naturally go sideways as well, but they just don't do it very often. But I need him to move his hip away from my leg, move his front end away from my leg. Long term. So the other thing I like about, just being a little bit snaky about his nose there. All right, we'll give him a little rest. The other thing I like about no spur is he's got time to, or he thinks he's got time to ignore me and think about it, which is good. You know, I don't want him to feel pressured like you've got to do it now and it's going to be really intense. There's another reason we wouldn't use spurs at this point. When he knows and I know he knows and he knows that I know he knows, which is just one of those little sayings which is a bit funny, but it does ring true. Then I'm happy to reinforce it, and he's kind of got to do it a lot sooner. But he's only a kid, so at this point I don't care if he takes a little while to answer. Good boy. I often have a saying, that I put to people, and they're getting tough on a horse about something they don't know, or they're really young and they don't understand, and they're just being tough on them. And it's like beating up, spanking a preschooler because he can't do algebra. If you haven't taught him to add and subtract and divide and everything else, he's got to have those building blocks before you can get tough on him for not doing more advanced stuff. And so far, all this guy's ever done is follow his nose, and we're asking him to do things a little different. So if he feels like he needs to, take the time, play, not ignore my leg, but he just doesn't really understand. I don't want my leg to be so intense that he feels like he's caught between a rock and a hard place. He doesn't know what I want, and if what I'm doing is really intense and he doesn't know what I'm after, oh, nice step. If he doesn't know what I want and I'm really intense, well, he's going to feel a bit trapped. Because, the pressure's on, physically and or mentally, and he doesn't know what I'm after, he's going to feel very trapped. Might just let him jog for a little. Oh, now. Good boy. Oh, that was a really good step. Especially from stationary. I started kind of rubbing and pushing with my left leg. His body went straight over to the right. Good, we'll let him quit on that. And this is one of those, horses doing things at their own pace. He's done a pretty good job there, and he's making a lot of good, tries. So I'm going to quit him on that for today. On that side, obviously. We've got to go do it all on the right side now. And things don't translate one side to the other with horses all the time. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't. So back end, front end. The other thing that can happen with him sometimes is he learnt that side passing right was the answer to all this leg aggravation. And just because I've changed legs, he may not compute, but he should, and he did, which is good. But again, because he's also done a lot of, these one rein stops, moving his hip out, leading his front end across, he should be following that feel pretty well. He's going to have a little bit better idea of that than some because he's done a lot of that up to this point. So even though we're changing the order in which we do it, he should still have it pretty well set in his head. And obviously we've gone back to back end, front end, back end, front end, because we've changed direction. And horses, like humans, sometimes they have good sides and bad sides. I do believe, like most older horses who have a good side and a bad side, their bad side gets created by the human. Because I know I did that to a lot of horses, like I was better one way than the other. So if I rode horses for long enough, they all had, similar issues, which taught me about my equitation and where I put my weight and how I sat and how I twisted, because they had to compensate for me. So I got them pretty even and ambidextrous, just as good going both ways. But they had little tendencies, and anything I rode for long enough all ended up with the same tendencies. So I had to change. Nowadays, the difference between is quite negligible. But I knew it was me who had to get better. And sometimes when people only ride one horse, they just assume that their horse is bad on the right and good on the left. What they don't know is if they rode a dozen horses, they'd all end up the same. Because it's a human sitting in a bad position, or they're stronger with one leg than the other, or they're a little uneven. And can horses compensate? Absolutely. Horses can compensate for people sitting lopsided, twisted, and kind of figure it out. But, I'm trying to help them be the best they can be and make things as easy as I can for them. So, if I can work on my flexibility and strength to keep it more even, then I will. Because I feel like that's my duty to my horse. If I can sit in, or if I learn better ways to sit and help him get his job done, I obviously want to get that done. It's a big deal. I also, and he's kind of getting pulled in all sorts of directions here, so I haven't really got a place to do it. But I've had horses in a home environment where I've trained them, every day in the same spot. And say the stables are over there, and that's where they kind of like to head. I don't mind using that horsey magnet to help them understand at this point. So, I could ask them to side pass here. And they're kind of like, well, yeah, that's good, because I'm getting to go in that direction that I wanted to go anyway. And then, of course, once they get the idea, they do have to learn to do it anywhere that they're asked. But he's this is not his home environment. And just the training that we've done is, we've kind of changing venues all the time. So he doesn't really have a strong magnet drawing him. He's kind of looking at everything everywhere all the time. But yeah, if you really wanted to go this way, I'd practice it a touch more here. Because just because it's working out his way, he's still, going to get that message about how to get that pressure release. Oh, nice step. Let's walk on. And again, one of his biggest issues is he's very focused on his nose. Like some horses aren't so, worried, He's very sensitive about his nose. So as I draw him around and everything, he's like, what's happening with my head? What's happening with my head? And I'd really like him to focus a little more on my leg. But he's getting it sorted. There we go. There. So some horses do this so good the first day. You know, they're kind of superstars about it. They just kind of feel where the pressure is and go, okay, well, I'll just go over there and do that. And he's being a little bit more reactionary about, oh, what's this, what's that, and getting distracted and things bothering his nose. So it's going to take a little longer with him than it would with some others. So like I said, if I can just get a few steps here and there like we got going the other direction, we're not going to badger him about it too long. That's a nice step. We may only get a good step or two here and there, but I know tomorrow we'll get to this point faster and easier, and then it'll get faster and easier and faster and easier. So he's done some things quick, some things slow. You know, this is going to be one of his relatively slow patches, but that's okay. Doesn't really matter. He gets that privilege of he doesn't have to fit our time frame. He's just we've got to do it in a time frame that suits him and gives him time to assess and think about it as much as he needs to. And pretty soon, because we've spent quite a while on it, I need to just change it up a little, maybe go for a little jog and a lope and do the things that he's really good at so he can go to bed, you know, feeling pretty clever about himself. Oh, there's some nice steps. We might quit on that. We'll go for a little jog. So at this point going forward, we're still just asking him to follow his nose. He has done a little bit of flexion work, as we know. But until I can steer him with my leg, I can't really combine that flexion work with the steering too much. Sorry, so just to explain that, vertical flexion, or to go forward and maintain that vertical flexion, I need to be able to control his shoulders more with my legs. So at this point, while he's just following his nose, it's sort of, I can't expect him to do the two. So as long as he jogs forward and he gives me a little bend, that's cool. I'll just give him a little lope. Might be a little playful, I don't know. Like I said, he's had a few days off. We've harassed him a little. With all that side pass work, so. Oh, good boy. But obviously we didn't bother him too much. Good man. Just revisit that step again and see what happens. That's pretty good. That is me being a little bit of an eager beaver. He's probably done plenty of that today. And say I've had horses on their first day do that and move on to pivoting around their hindquarter and all that kind of stuff. He's being a little slower on that. That's his privilege. Oh, now, boy. Just bending him around here, more just because he leaned into that bosal just as I stopped. So I was asking him to sort of come around the corner and stop, and he leant to the left. So we're just doing the opposing bend. Like we were going around to the right, and I just wanted him to kind of stay here and stop, and he was leaning into it a bit. So we finished with, no, I'd like a little bit more bend there. We'll just do a little back up, so get him to flex. Ask him to move his feet. Good boy. Another one. Good boy. And one more. That's it. Cool. We might call it a day there. And we're calling it a day there, like it's not a huge ride, but he had a lot of new things to deal with and process. And we've got to take that into account. Like, we probably could have rode him down the road for 2 hours and just looked at the scenery, it would have been fine, but we obviously can't do this work for 2 hours because it's more mentally intense. So we've got to always keep that in mind and balance that up. And, you know, I did quite a bit on that today. And obviously some people are going to say that was way too much, and others are going to say, well, I would have wanted more. My experience level, I feel that was a good point to ask and get him to. And again, he's a pretty cool horse, so we could do a bit, but he's a horse. Always got to keep that in mind. So he's only going to be able to deal with so much at once. Anyway, cool. I better give him a rub, just in case I got all of that wrong. And I'm more than humble enough to admit that, yeah, occasionally I'm going to err this way or that way. So yeah, I'll give him a rub, because he's doing the best he can with the guy he got stuck with. But I don't think he's too worried about it. All right, catch you on the next one. G'day, thank you so much for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, turn on the notifications bell, that would be awesome. Thank you. Cheers.